our first and most basic element of design is the one that is the most familiar, the line. It's very simple and incredibly versatile. So what is a line? It's something that we, perceive through vision. It's a connection between two different points. So when we're talking about a ballerina, for example, this term would describe the outline of the dancer's complete body, so the pose while they're in a particular shape and stretch. So we would call this their line. So it's sort of referencing a complete look. So it's a more abstract idea of a line. But the more physical idea is one that is a structure that has a significantly greater length than width. So it's perceived, the length is perceived to be of the utmost importance. So what can a line do? Well, it can lead your eye. It can help us focus on a particular direction or divide a particular area, or maybe even distinguish an area. So in a retail environment, for example, we may be able to use lines, whether it be on the floor plane or in physical space, to show where a particular department might be, or when a different product changes, or where sales might happen in the area. You could also distinguish an area in the community. It's pretty amazing that a bridge, for example, it's one long line that connects two different areas. Again, sometimes lines are a little bit more abstract, so they aren't always something that we visually can perceive, but something that we feel as well. They really can end up creating a feeling or a mood just by the particular choice of line that we use. And I'll show you what I mean by that in the next few slides. And they can even have great symbolic meaning. Again, we'll take a closer look as we go through this presentation. So first, let's break down lines into their different line types. There are actual lines or implied lines, inner or outer lines. What is an actual line? It is one, like the name implies, exists in space. So it's physical. It's created by the edge of an object or a shape. So in a garment, for example, this might be created by the fabric itself and the seams. So you can see in some of these visuals, like this pink dress, those outer boundary lines that create the silhouette and create that ruffled effect are actual lines. They physically exist in space. We can see them as an edge of an object, and they create a shape. On the surface structure of the other garment in the presentation, you can see those harsh black lines. They're solid, they're completely connected, and they lay within the boundary of the garment and within the on the surface. So those lines you could see very, very clearly, making them actual lines. Implied lines, on the other hand, they do not exist completely in space. So they're not one solid line. You can think of these lines as sort of dash lines, or ones that we're trying to move our eye by implying that there is a whole length there. So here in the image on the bottom, you can see all these little dots that are floating in space. I bet you know what you see there without the actual object. we're implying that structure of a car outline with its frame. So in the garment, the buttons are doing something really similar. So that's how a designer can start to create this idea of line through silhouette, through a collared edge, through sleeves, hems, or even pockets. So our eye moves up and down that garment and through the body of that car just because our brain knows to connect those, literally connect those dots. So to further break down line, we can have inner lines and outer lines. So an outer line is going to be more directly aligned with a silhouette of a garment. So the outer edge of a form. So you can see here on this bodice, the structure along that top sort of sweetheart neckline where the garment touches the skin, that is the outer boundary. That's considered an outer line of the garment. And then going down the side seam along that same top portion of the garment, we would consider this an outer line. It helps form that silhouette, that form-fitting silhouette. Now an inner line lies within the boundary of the form. So again, it physically is on the garment surface. So here, what's making up the inner lines are the seams. So there's a seam at the center front of that skirt. And there's also what's called boning in that bodice top. So you can see those lines. There are about 5 or 6 lines on that front bodice, and that's a structural component of the bodice to make sure that it doesn't fall down and that it can be strapless. Typically, boning is made with really hard, rigid plastic or metal that's put into those seams. So what else can we think about with a line? Man, we can do so many different things and we can create so many different kinds of lines. We could play with the length, the width, how uniform that line is, the direction that it moves in. We can even think about the edges of a line and how those are represented, and then give it a path as well. So all these small choices as a designer are going to create a different effect. It's going to lead the viewer's eye in a different direction. It's going to make them think of the design in a different kind of way, just again by making these small moves. For example, a thick line might imply something very sturdy or strong, and a thin line may evoke something more refined or delicate. So those words that I just used to describe the quality of the line are something we're going to talk about a lot in this class. Those are going to be considered expressive qualities. So as a designer, you're going to make a choice. Is my line long? Is it short? Is it thick? Is it thin? Is it broken? Is it continuous? And so on and so forth. And with those choices, then come those expressive qualities, like being sturdy and strong, or delicate and refined. What is it that you want to express? You have to be thinking about both at the same time as a designer. So here's a quick little bit of practice. So think for a quick second. What do you think? An A, what kind of lines are those ruffles on that bodice in the dress? Are they actual lines or implied lines? Are they inner lines or outer lines? If you were thinking actual lines and inner lines, That would be the best answer for these ruffles. We physically see the presence of the heavy ruffle line, and they lay within the silhouette, within the body, on the garment. How about B? What do you think? That line along the outer edge of the garment. Is it one continuous line? It is. So it's considered an actual line, but it's an outer line because it's on the silhouette, or that outer edge, that outer boundary of our garment. Oh, I hit it a little too fast, so here are our answers. So here on our cake, you can see those little pink circles create implied lines, right? Our mind is connecting those dots so that we know that our eye should circle around and create a line with those elements. They also lay within the boundary on the cake itself, so they become inner lines. Direction and path. So we're going to take a look at the different ways we can now lay our lines, whether it be in a 2D or 3-dimensional aspect of a design. And we're going to see what the impact is, what these formal qualities can turn into expressive qualities. So let's start with a vertical line. Vertical lines have lots of really excellent expressive qualities. So what can a vertical line do within a design? It can create a powerful, confident, elegant, prideful, formal, and very stable type of design. What you can see here is in the piece of architecture, the vertical lines are really creating this sense of height to the space. So that's something that's important with vertical line. Sort of from the beginning of time, if you think about a person standing straight up, upright, and tall, this is supposed to be reflecting this idea of a human, confident, powerful, in all of their glory, prideful, creating this tall effect. So a vertical line, again, in now design, represents the human body in a lot of ways, the human figure. So what does this mean? It can create, again, a really strong visual impact. Here, we're even using repetition of this idea of strong vertical line in those columns. So not only have we made a really thick, heavy column, but we've repeated it over and over again to show its importance. In the garment, we're doing something else to create that kind of elegant, slimming effect. We've used all white in the garment. So what does she look like? She looks like a column. She looks like this tall, firm, stable, elegant person just through her garment. The next type of line is a horizontal line. Now, think about the body once again, and instead of standing up tall, straight, and formal, we're laying down and we're resting and we're going to bed. So that's where our ideas of horizontal line come in. Our bodies being at rest or repose. So horizontal lines can express that idea, peacefulness, something very passive or restful, very informal or relaxed. So other things that horizontal lines can do, they tend to be a little more contemporary, maybe within an interior design. They can add width as well. So if you think about on the body, where might we not want to add width? Okay, if it's a female silhouette, potentially not at the waist, potentially not at the shoulders, potentially not at the hips. However, maybe you do want to add, a really broad, bold, masculine shoulder. What we do, we put a heavy horizontal line at that placement on the body. All these decisions are up to you. Just have to know what it is you're trying to achieve and then what tool you can use to achieve it. Diagonal lines, some of my favorite. I like active, exciting, dynamic, dramatic type of lines that really attract the eye. So diagonal lines do something really nice. Think about, we're standing up tall, human body once again. We're going to lay down and go to rest. A diagonal line is one that falls right in between. So we're no longer standing straight, and we're not lying down quite yet, but we have this sort of idea of falling. So that's where this idea of suggesting movement comes into play with the diagonal line. So it really can help move our eye quite a bit within a garment. So it's really often used in sportswear, and it's a great way to accent feminine curves with form-fitting clothes especially. Curvilinear line. They become a lot more graceful and sweet and feminine. I think Emma Watson wears it very well, and it reflects her personality. So this very soft and playful, very organic feeling garment that she's wearing, I think again is meant to be a reflection of her personality. So another way that you can start linking concepts together and thinking about as a designer what your garment, if you're talking fashion, should be conveying about the person who's wearing it or the customer. The same idea can be translated into a landscape, for example. So where do we typically see curvilinear lines? In nature. So that's where this sort of organic concept comes from. Something again very natural and comfortable and warm. I think Chihuly's artwork, his glass artwork, is a great example of this as well. If you haven't seen his work, it's typically up at the Franklin Park Conservatory here in Columbus. I highly recommend you go and enjoy some of his pieces. So one extra thing to think about, so Chihuly not only creates a dynamic expression and a little bit of drama with this use of curvilinear line, but he also creates very soft expression by using something very fragile. It becomes very graceful and feminine and playful looking. But he also uses color and mixes bright colors as a way to reinforce those ideas as well. And finally, kinetic line. So a kinetic line is one that has so much energy that it can be a little bit tiring. It's overly active and typically creates a bit of an optical illusion. So this is a line that moves in many different directions and at the end of the day kind of commands interaction between the observer and the object that expresses all these kinetic lines. It really incorporates multidimensional movement. So, when we are talking about lines, it's really a tool that, initial tool in your tool belt that we can use to create balance, maybe emphasize strength or hide weaknesses. Again, that might be in relationship to a garment on the body or a landscape or an architectural environment or experience as well. So in this example, you can start to see that nice use of implied line through the buttons and that strong line at the neckline that makes our eye move all the way up and really frame this model's face. Creates that idea of lengthening and strength. So these last few slides I want to show you really just to start making you think a little bit more about what a line can do when we're looking at the same exact object over and over again, but just breaking it down differently. So, for example, this first rectangle, we've used a vertical line right down the center to lengthen and slim. Whereas in the other rectangle, which is exactly the same, we've cut it right in half using the same horizontal line width, and now we can see that this rectangle feels shorter and wider. We could use many vertical lines to widen as our eye kind of travels across left to right. Or we could turn those lines and use them horizontally to lengthen and move our eye up and down. So think again on a garment. If this is a pattern that you've chosen, if you have a dress, the one on the left with the many vertical lines might make our eye look left to right. So it might widen our model and our garment. Might not necessarily be a bad thing, it's just a design choice. On the right hand side, same idea. Think about how this could really slim or move our eye kind of up and down to create a more powerful slenderizing look. Just played with the width of those lines, adding weight, or playing with how top heavy maybe a figure could look. Again, let's just break this rectangle down. With that diagonal close to the horizontal, it's going to shorten and widen a garment, or again, a space, versus a diagonal line that uses the entire length of that rectangle, really takes advantage of more of the space that starts to create more of a lengthening effect. Or playing with a reverse diagonal, so that's shortening and widening this area. We could move our horizontal line just above the center of that rectangle to elongate and lengthen the bottom. Imagine if this rectangle was the human body, and imagine the human body proportions. If we're trying to lengthen their leg, maybe we move the belt or whatever's happening at the waist up higher to create that longer leg look. Versus moving that horizontal line below the midpoint. That would then lengthen and slim our torso, for example. So these are just, again, very abstract ways to start thinking about how you can apply line to designs. And I know we're discussing a little more fashion design at this rate, but we'll practice throughout the entire semester the use of line through all different kinds of designs. So here we go. Here are a few examples in fashion where we're shortening, widening, and adding some weight to our designs. You can see the Jill Sanders, wide line, use of horizontal line adds width. In the Dior, we're putting that belt right at her waist, right at the higher, a little bit higher than the center of her body, in order to kind of lengthen that leg. And the Salvatore garment, right at the center line again, we've put a nice thick wide band, and we've created a really nice balanced proportion from the top of her garment to the bottom. Here again, we can start to see the use of line on this facade. This facade treatment, all these vertical lines used closely together over and over again really makes our eye move left to right. So it adds sort of width to this facade. And on the right, we've used really elegant, slender, horizontal lines to create a very contemporary, modern type of feeling in this space. Feels very peaceful, I'd say, as well. Here are a few more examples of how we could lengthen or slim a garment or a body with a garment. So here you can see on the far left in the red garment, the all red garment, that use of all one color helps us unify this idea of one line. Her pose even helps kind of lengthen and slim as well. The gentleman's garment, that use of multiple horizontal lines really moves our eye up and downward. So we're creating that lengthening and slimming effect at the central torso. The garment with yellow and that bold red line, the dress, the Jonathan Saunders, our eye really goes to that focus, that high contrast central point, and our eye moves from the top of the garment all the way to the bottom. So that play with color and line really helps create a very bold, strong look. And finally, the Roberto Cavalli, that pant with that crease, it helps create, again, a nice lengthening effect. It's very tall, bold, vertical, strong garment. We can do it within architecture. We can use diagonal line. You can see the staircase that moves upwards within this space really moves our eye from the bottom to the top, sort of lengthening this area. The use of white color also helps create this effect. And then with the windows as well. So columns, tall windows, and light, we really are enforcing and emphasizing that tall, very strong, sturdy type of concept, expressive quality. And finally, we can think of qualities of line being symbols. So if you think about Nike, one little line, one swish has created a phenomenon really within the retail industry. That one logo has so much meaning behind it. It represents a brand, and one that will probably be around for a very long time. Think about the tartan plaid that we see from Burberry. That plaid, that use of line, that arrangement of line, as soon as we see that, again, we associate with the brand, and we think of something traditional, something, again, very a quality that we would see for a very, very long time within our product history of Burberry. We even can use line to tell people, what to do. So if you think about a grocery aisle, we put all of our products in a line so that people know how to flow throughout the space. We can even push them up really, really close to product, like in this really small retail environment, where we make them interact with the product because we've really put these narrow lines together and forced us to then be a part of engaging with that product. One other idea I want you to think about is Michael Phelps. As soon as he's done with a race and he wins, what does he do? Puts his finger up in the air and he points. What is he pointing to? What is he trying to say? Well, it's just one finger, one line. And with that one line, he's saying, I am the greatest, I am the best. And that is very powerful.